Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net. Doing a request, actually, although I probably was planning on doing this. I was requested to do this particular video. This past weekend was the final weekend of the Midsummer Fantasy Renaissance Faire. This was 2018's Midsummer Fantasy Renaissance Faire in Ansonia, Connecticut at Warsaw Park. This will be at least probably my fourth time attending the event, and unfortunately it has ended. It did end, I think, on Sunday was the last day, but I had a blast. Basically, after I did my first review, the very first time I attended the fair, that was my first Renaissance fair I had gone to in probably well over a decade. I've actually been going to a bunch of other Renaissance fairs. Renaissance fairs have been kind of popping up all over the tri-state area. And so I've been attending some of them, and honestly, I keep going back to Midsummer as like my current gold standard. And this is coming from somebody who had been to the Robin Hood festivals. Again, these are ones in the tri-state area, so I'm going to keep them to that. Or even the King Richard's Fair, I think, which is in either Massachusetts. I think it's in Massachusetts. I'm still using the Midsummer as my gold standard. I don't know why. There's something about that fair that just rings me the right way. Maybe it's because it's more focused on, and it always has been, it's more focused on the myth and mythology, the fantasy, of course, being in the title, than it was the strict adherence to history. Now, obviously that's subjective. Many people will probably say, I prefer something that's very, very authentic. And I have seen fairs which had a component of history. This does not. But if that's what interests you, then that's fine. But for me, I was very much about Dungeons and Dragons and Final Fantasy and Pokemon and Chrono Trigger, and I felt right at home at this fair, and once again, I felt right at home at this fair. We're going to break this down into a couple of different moments as we talk about this, because we've got a lot to go. We got a lot to talk about. I went to the final Saturday's event, which is the third weekend. A lot happened on that day, and I kind of want to just kind of talk about it. A lot of the stuff that I've seen previously or talked about previously in other reviews of the fair in previous years have come back. Particularly Daniel Greenwolf came back this year, and he killed it again. And we're going to talk a little bit more about him later on when we talk about the finale of the event. But Daniel Greenwolf, I was so happy to see him back. He's awesome. He was funny. Again, he came out. He did a great act again, and people loved it. So fantastic. There was a show that was going on this year that came back. Unfortunately, the crowd was too big to go see him. I couldn't get a seat early enough to basically see his act. But Shakespeare Approves returned this year. I have not seen his act, unfortunately, and I couldn't see it that much. I couldn't see too much of it this year because, again, the crowd to see him, apparently he was very popular this year, so props to you, Shakespeare. But the Shakespeare Approves, he did a different show every night, or every act. He was doing a different parody of a different Shakespeare. But that was a great show from what I was heard. But unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see it myself. Maybe next year, obviously, if he comes back. So something to look forward to next time, certainly. Granny Gruesome was back. Christopher the Witch Doctor was back. And actually, he did two shows. When I went to go see Christopher the Witch Doctor last year, he did kind of a combination of like body... Okay, he stuck needles through his hand. I definitely remember him sticking needles through his hand. And I got a friend that's squeamish, and I told him, you may not like this act too much. But also he did hypnosis. I participated in a hypnosis thing with my girlfriend. That was fun. This was last year, of course. And he talked about things like the Wendigo, and basically mythologies and things like that, which is very interesting, certainly. They don't talk about that too much in schools anymore, which is incredibly unfortunate. At least not here. And, I mean, honestly, I hadn't heard about the Wendigo until I played the game Until Dawn. And I even told him that, play Until Dawn. He probably has at this point, but yeah. So, I was told that he mostly, for at least one of his acts, he stuck to the history and he did the hypnosis, but he didn't do any body manipulation or any pain thing. And then I later found out, I went to a different act, which was called the Strangelove. Basically, it was like the Strangelove. It was called Strangelove. And he did it with his wife. Basically, he did the act with his wife. And the big finale was her getting on a bed of nails. So there was definitely body manipulation on that one. So my assumption is that he kind of moved the body manipulation stuff to the Strangelove act, which is fine. You know, so he did that with his wife. That's fine. You know, that's fine. That I got to see. That was a fun show. That was hilarious to see him take a cinder block, put it on his wife's chest while she's laying on a bed of nails, and smash it with a sledgehammer. That was great. So props to you, Christopher, and Mrs. Christopher, for that one. Sasha the Fire Gypsy was back. Saw her last year. She fired up the crowd. Thank you, pun. I'll talk more about her later because she was again involved in the finale. As for things like vendors, most of the vendors were back, as far as I remember. It seemed like there were a bit fewer on the food options this year, but other vendors were kind of picking up the slack. So, like for example, I specifically want to talk about the food vendors before I talk about any of the retail vendors, because I don't really want to talk about the retail vendors that much right now. But, I mean, the barbecue stand was back. They were selling barbecue, pulled pork, mac and cheese, included barbecue, fried mac and cheese and stuff like that. Most people that were there went for the mac and cheese, and I can totally be fine with that. The fair stand was selling turkey dinners, turkey legs, hamburgers, cheese, you know, hot dogs, that sort of thing, basically, which is, you know, that's typical fair food, and that's good stuff, certainly. There were pickle carts back. I got myself you know, trust me, a great snack for a hot day. Fresh pickle is perfect. They were selling popcorn. They were selling ice cream was back. The pineapple smoothie place was back. I didn't, other than the pickles, I can't really attest to too much of the food, but there is one thing I definitely want to attest for. The Pie Man was back this year. And one thing that they brought back this year is usually when you get personal pockets, kind of like Hot Pockets basically, but they're personal pies, and they do sell dessert pies like apple pies and stuff like that. But most of the time when I go for the Pie Man, I usually have to get like one of their, you know, you can have a meat pie, or like, which is like potato and meat, you know, something like that. But in previous years, I think it was at the Robin Hood Festival for Pirate Weekend, they themed every weekend. This was previous years. They'd attended a fair in the tri-state area where they did for a special, you know, weekend event. They had this thing called Kraken Chicken. They had a special pie, which was basically shredded chicken with sliced carrots, marinated in, I think it's Kraken rum, which is not something I'd seen before, but I saw the labels. And they brought it back. They brought it back at the Midsummer Fair. I had one. It was damn good. In fact, they told me it was too popular the year that they did it just as a one-off, that they had to bring it back. The demand was just too high for it. And let me tell you something. People were buying the Kraken pies. Those chicken pies were very popular. So props to the Pie Man for an incredible, you know, bringing back that pie. If you ever get a chance to try one of those Kraken chicken pies, if they bring it back, I totally recommend them because they are delicious. In fact, I almost had two. I had one, and then later in the day, I was like, maybe I should get another one. But it was so darn hot, I just kept buying sodas for the rest of the day. Auntie Irwin's spices were back. Oh God. She had this new spice mix. Like, I'm Italian, so it was like 4 different dried garlics. Bene, that's all I'm saying. So, other vendors, of course, Edge Beauty was back. Nightly Endeavors was back. They had a little spot where you could basically look up your name and your history. Basically, I don't remember what the term is about that, but basically about your roots, so you could look up your history, your family history. There were blacksmiths doing stuff. I got a cool picture of them working. So pretty good vendors. Most of the time, it's one thing I do want to mention is, like I said, for other events and stuff like that, Midsummer Fantasy's vendors are certainly cheaper. They're certainly better. It's a better. By cheaper I don't mean less quality. I mean their prices are lower than other fairs. Like their vendors are a better deal than if, let's say, for example, if I went to, let's say, King Richard's, I would pay a lot more for a similar thing at King Richard's. So if you're interested in, like, you know, goods, gifts, that sort of thing, basically, Midsummer Fantasy, their prices are low. Their prices are much more competitive. So props to the vendors there. I didn't really, you know, I didn't do much shopping. Again, it was such a hot day. I was spending most of my spending money on, like, food and like drinks and stuff because it was just so darn hot. But I think I went to the best day because I went on the last weekend and it was certainly more reasonably, it was cooler than previous weekends from what I was told. So I know what you guys are probably thinking. What do I think of? That's just a quick overview. What did I think of the acts, of the scenes? What did I think of the show itself? And what did I think of the finale? Well, I want to talk first about this year's story. And this year's story revolved around a creature called the Green Man. And the way they're describing this Green Man really made me think of Swamp Thing. I'm just going to draw that parallel right now. In fact, I think I might have said it when they described the Green Man at one point during one of the bits. They were describing the powers of the Green Man, and I said, yeah, that's Swamp Thing. Nothing wrong with that. Swamp Thing is really powerful. So the story is that the kingdom is under stress by this thing called by the sovereign and his army of evil, essentially. And so mortal men have to fight together with immortals in order to figure out a way to resurrect the Green Man, because they felt that there was a balance between good and evil. And if the green, because the scale has been tipped in evil, has been tipped towards evil for so long, that if they can somehow figure a way to bring back the Green Man, who is currently under a curse, unconscious, he will come back and he will put an end to the sovereign, which will then basically Return of the Jedi all over again. You kill the Emperor, pretty much the whole empire is all over, and the rebels win. And I can get behind that kind of story. I've seen that kind of story done in previous years, but this was a story that was done that was a bit more hopeful. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, and I mentioned this in my previous review when I was talking about the Dominion. That story had an overarching sense of dread through it. And that was such a whiplash to me because 2015's show was very much hopeful about the gauntlet and everything. And there are references, which I don't know if I want to get into for spoiler reasons. The gauntlet does come back. That was, out of all the moments in the show for the day, the moment I saw that gauntlet come back out, I was like, oh, damn. It just got real here. But this was not a sense of dread. This was hopeful. They thought they had a good chance. Granted, it was going to be difficult. And it doesn't go exactly as it was expected. There were twists to the story. I missed the opening, so I didn't catch everything. I missed the first act. And as far as I can tell, it hasn't been posted online, at least not for the weekend that I went. It probably will later on. Yeah, it was a great story with a twist ending. At the end, it does feel like evil is vanquished, although it's not totally put away. They did set up for future events, and there has been a 2019 event confirmed. So, really looking forward to that one. Absolutely. Before I talk about the finale, a couple of other acts that I wanted to mention. There was a guy, a whip artist named Wick, W-Y-C-K, that performed. I saw his Over 21 show, which was hilarious. I cannot repeat the stories, otherwise this channel might get an 18+ on it. So Funny stories, Wick. He was hilarious. I saw his under 21 show. I would recommend the Wick and the Wick show, even for his general ed show, would probably be for 13 plus. But what am I to, who am I to talk, say that sort of thing? Particularly because I don't think you're going to get the jokes unless you're like 13 or 12 or 13 or something like that. But in fact, actually, I think Wick even acknowledged that. Like the really small children probably just wouldn't understand what he was talking about. And that can happen. So my guess is that if you can figure out his jokes, by all means, go and see him. He was hilarious. Yeah. And we're going to talk more about whips when we start talking about the finale, actually. The Crimson Pirates did a performance, or did several performances throughout the day. I saw them performing, or I heard them performing, I should say. They did a big performance at the finale. After the fair was over, they also did performances throughout the day. I caught them in the 21 Up bar. They great music to listen while you're having a drink and having some pretzels. Loved how they dressed. Oh God, I loved how they dressed. And so they were a great show. If you like pirate music, of course. The Creepy Bard came back this year. I love the Creepy Bard. If you've seen his YouTube acts, then you know what you're getting into. You get a good taste of his music. Basically, he did some great songs with a bunch of his peers and a bunch of his friends. So yeah, Creepy Bard, hilarious. But that's not what you guys want me to talk about. You guys want me to talk about the finale. Well, we're going to do a part 2 about this. So stay tuned to this channel, and because I honestly think that the part 2 really requires its own video. So stay tuned, and we'll talk about part 2 soon. Until next time, my name is Maniac, and take care. Over and out.